This is the second talk I've done for the Glove Factory. I did one in, I think, 2018 when it was also hammering down with rain, so I feel a little bit of responsibility for that. But thank you to everyone for coming, especially in the appalling weather. As Holly says, my name is Matt Wicks. I'm the co-CEO of the Virtual Forge, and we divide the company into two halves, the commercial arm and the technical arm. I'm responsible for the technical arm. And I'm going to talk today, I'm going to set the scene with 3 or 4 slides about who we are and the context of that. And then I'm going to talk about the questions we get asked most often, some of our experiences, as Holly says, some of the things we've done, some of the questions we've been asked, some of the challenges that we faced, and just general meandering. If anybody can't hear or anything, please do shout, and I will also shout. So the way that we approach AI as an organization, and I'm sure all of you have kind of come across it in one form or another, and have also been, whether it's through using ChatGPT, or whether it's through using Alexa, or whether it's through using any other tools, it's impossible to avoid. And as a company, we've developed a way of talking about it and a way of engaging with our clients, which we think is kind of the best way of relating to all of the challenges that are in the workspace. So we talk about developing an AI strategy that works for you, and it's based on 3 separate pillars which underpin everything to do with artificial intelligence. Enablement and integration, so getting AI into the company, into your life, into your systems, into your charity, into your university, into your project, in a way that's simple and useful and productive. Making sure the data is organized for that. There's a couple of examples I'm going to show you later on about why that is the probably single most critical thing, and there were some announcements from Microsoft over the last couple of days related to this, of where things can go significantly wrong. And AI governance, which is obviously a hot topic, because although everybody is using it, everybody goes in and types their question into ChatGPT. Well, if you're typing your question into the free version of ChatGPT, you are giving your intellectual property to OpenAI in order to be able to, for them to research on it. So things like that, and making sure that, how do you, as an organization, make sure that your workers are not doing that in that environment, but yet enable them to make use of the great advances that there are. So a couple of slides just about us, very simply. We are based in London. We say Bath, but we actually mean Holt here. Lisbon, we have an office in Lisbon. It's a hardship, but I do have to go out there sometimes to I came back on Wednesday when it was 31 degrees in Lisbon and Philadelphia, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, because we do some interesting things out there specifically related to AI. These are some of the people we work with, and I put this up not to kind of talk about who we are, but to give you an idea of the breadth of industries that we work across. And that's important when we talk and think about AI, because we're not simply talking about AI from the position of we're a technology company that enables this. We have real conversations with these and multiple other companies all the time around the challenges that they face in the technology space and how they want to solve real problems with these organizations. It's also worth mentioning that although for those of you who know us, those of you who don't know, we are a technology company, we're technology enablers, but myself and my business partner are also involved in, or have been involved in the past as well, with a large number of other businesses. And that informs a lot of these discussions, because we've been involved with DreamTech, which is a video production and streaming company, a company called Boundless XR, who are virtual reality company. Creative, which is a Microsoft accountancy company. Lockside Consulting, which does artists' rights for music production. Lineup Polo, which is a company that that has an app which matches polo players and polo teams with each other. Accredit Solutions, which is an accreditation company which does the badges for some of the largest, like Arsenal, Chelsea, various other cricketing and rugby games. And Clean Car, which is a startup designed, or was a startup designed to enable you to make choices based on your driving patterns as to what is the best electric vehicle for you. The reason I put all of those up is, again, to give you some context as to where we look at things from and our perspective. So our perspective is not just from the point of view of, oh, it's a technology company. Our perspective is we're working with companies that are very involved in the creative arts, in video production, in experiential reality, in sports, and also in pharma, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So we have a very broad set of conversations that we're having with people about the technology. And then, of course, as the Virtual Forge, we talk about solutions and so on. But this is more about those general discussions that people have across all these different companies and organizations. So the question we get asked most often, and this is something that really has been in the last 2 years, we'll get people who call us up who are either long-standing existing clients like the ones that we put up there, people we've worked with for 10, 15 years, and they'll say, we need to get AI. And we're like, okay. Or we'll get, increasingly, we get people who are calling us or responding to our outreach and saying, yes, we want to do AI. Boom. And that's the thing. Quite often, everybody has been given the task, not everybody, but lots of people have been given the task. I want you to, the senior management or the board will point to someone and say, okay, as part of your deliverables this year, you've got to get AI into the business. Sometimes there's a use case behind it. Sometimes there's not a use case behind it. And they're just looking for brainstorming. They're looking for ideas. They're looking for a review of the business processes that they have. They're looking for the strategy piece around what they could do. Or they're looking for a quick win. Or they're looking for a sticker they can put on something and just say that's AI because my boss wants it to be AI. You know, and any and all of those are true. So AI is an incredibly broad definition. It's been around for a very long time. You know, so the first work on it was done in the 1950s, and there are lots and lots of examples. If anybody has nothing else to do for the rest of today, I suggest you go onto YouTube. You can find some videos of me from more than 10 years ago with lots more hair, talking about AI at that point. And this is not the same talk that I gave then, by the way. So AI is lots of different things, and we use it inherently in everything we do. You know, it's behind the translators that you have. So when you're using, you know, you're going out and you're using Google Translate. Nowadays you can take a photo of a sign and it will translate it in real time. Samsung has some very cool new headphones that are coming out, which actually do real-time translation for you as you're speaking to people. You know, that's just using that technology, and it's been around for, I don't know how long Google Translate's been around for, and obviously it's improved, but it's been around for a very long time. And at its fundamental, the ability to be able to take and understand human speech in all its contexts is really at the heart of AI. Bots that answer questions, I'm sure we've all come across them, and they've become so much better now. You know, I remember going to what was the Network Rail website and trying to use a bot a few years ago to be able to book a train. Completely impossible, very frustrating. Now it's seamless, and often you don't even know that you're talking to one. Even when you phone up, you know, because the quality of the voice synthesis is so good, you've got there. Online doctors, again, this is something that is increasing, certainly in the States. This is very, very popular. The ability to be able to have a diagnosis, which is not simply a question of these are your symptoms, tick, oh yes, something, then we'll map that to you're dying, which usually is the outcome of these things. But a much more genuine, reflective, trained analysis, which doesn't always replace the full piece, but it gets you through that first triage process that there would be. I'm not, by the way, saying whether these are a good thing or a bad thing. Cars that drive you, self-driving cars. This is one of the great promises that there is. I think we're still a little way away from that, but you can already see, you know, if you have a car that has self-driving, you know, the ability for it to be able to steer, control speed, you know, make judgments, because it's not simply reacting to information, it's actually making judgments all the time for you while you're sitting inside that, and it's using a form of artificial intelligence to be able to do that and to learn from it. And that's the other part of this that's really important. You know, as I drive around, I have a Tesla, as I drive around in my Tesla, I'm closing my eyes, putting my hands up, letting it drive me, but I'm also feeding information all the time back to Elon Musk, who is you know, learning from that and generating from that. Warehouse managers. You know, obviously Amazon has made this a huge thing, but the ability for entire warehouses to be fully automated, and not simply, you click a button and it goes from A to B. It's making choices and decisions about how to stack things in the most effective way, how to organize the shelves in the best way, constantly looking at temperature and moving things around to the best place within that. So it's much more than simply a thing. And we have a warehouse in Philadelphia, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing out there. Movie makers, controversial. And this is obviously, many of you will have seen OpenAI's tool that they demonstrated but have not publicly released, whereby a text prompt by spoken word, you can create a small video, which is, not as good as Hollywood, but pretty impressive in terms of what it can do. Again, highly controversial. Teachers, the ability to be able to teach and learn things to greater or lesser degrees. And there is an argument that this will never replace a proper teacher. There's also an argument to say that this allows people who will never get the level of education they would get otherwise will be reached by this. So like everything, there are several million different variations. The office helper, this is a great one. The person who, and this is probably the most fundamental. A lot of people think, add this to my schedule. Most people will have used Alexa or one of the other smart speakers. You speak to it and it does a task for you. Same thing here. This is just having on your desktop. I'm sure many of you have come across Microsoft's Copilot, which is designed to do the same thing. You can say to it, raise me an invoice for Matt Wicks for £700, and it will do it instead of you having to do anything. And that's pretty reliable because it's a repeatable type of thing. Data analyst, this is something that people are being able to see a lot more now. The ability, instead of having custom charts, custom dashboards built, the ability to be able to set up an AI where you say, as the CTO or the CEO or the CIO, I want to sit in there and I want to say, show me the sales figures for the last month by person. I want to see I want to see that compared to the training that these people have received. And you can actually have a conversation with it, and it's generating those charts and analytics all the time, because it's just doing the same thing as all of these are doing, which is understanding a set of data that you've set to it and then putting it back in human understandable form. Travel agent, I can go in, I can book my flight, I can book my holiday. I can actually now go into Kayak, for example, and I can say, I want to go to Switzerland in the middle of December for some bizarre reason, and as a result of that, it will then come back with the best prices. I've got a family of 19, and I want to take my goat, and it will come back and it will give you all of those things as well without you having to think about it. Songwriter, again, highly controversial. The ability to be able to create music, and I use create in quotes as we'll come back to. The architect, sorry Nick, the ability to be able to create building plans based on information that's put in, and the ability to be able to take away the human part in that. But can it really? And that's a theme I'm going to come back to. Search, the ability to be able to make search much more intelligent and omnipresent, so you're not having to be able to always think about how you put the search term. You can just do it. Netflix recommendations. Netflix recommendations are interesting because recommendations have been around with Amazon for years and years, but Netflix takes it to another level. It understands and analyzes the image that you like. So if I click on, for example, I watch a movie, and the poster for that movie has a person leaning forward into the camera. If you watch the images that are then put up for you over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, more and more of those poster frames that you think are just the movie frame or a capture from the image are actually people leaning forward, because it's learned that you are the sort of person who responds to those images, and it will find a snapshot or even create a snapshot from those movies or images for it as well. Traffic cameras, big one. Devon and Cornwall at the moment, they've just allowed the second phase of this program where, I can't remember the statistics, but it's something like 400 extra cases of traffic violations have been spotted by AI cameras than by other cameras. So this is things like people on the phone. This is things like people who had babies sitting on their laps, obviously speeding, because it can analyze and understand the images in real time. You're giving it information, you're giving it a task, you're giving it an output, and then it's giving you a traffic violation. So just to talk a little bit about the basics of this, what is AI? And I think it's really important to understand what AI is and what AI isn't. So it's not magic. It's not Skynet. It's none of those things. So at the very basics of probabilistic prediction. So it works on the basis of probabilistic prediction. And this is a very simplistic version of it, but there is a saying, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, give an infinite number of monkeys a typewriter and there is a possibility, that they will create a work that could be by Shakespeare, but it's pretty unlikely. So statistically, you could eventually throw everything together and you get to that point, but obviously it's pretty unlikely that that would happen. Give an infinite number of English literature students a typewriter and the chances of them creating a Shakespearean work increase. The probability there is much higher because they've been fed information, they've got a much more structured reasoning process, and they've been given that input. But that's not the only input they've been given. They've been given a whole bunch of other input. They've been given all of the other stuff that's in there. I don't recommend this, by the way. Take a whole bunch of children away at birth, lock them up, and only give them input in Shakespearean prose and poetry, and then give them a typewriter, and the chances are pretty good that they will create some Shakespearean-style verse. Because that's what they've been given. That's what they've been trained on. That's what their input has been. So you have given them a very specific piece of information. A lot of information. You're not asking them to generate something that is what they've been given. You're not saying recite Romeo and Juliet, which they probably could, but you are actually saying to them, given everything that you know and you've been trained on, give us an output that is aligned with that. What's probably the most likely output? And obviously there's a lot more to AI than that, but that is at its heart essentially what it's doing. It is taking the information that you have trained it on and giving you the most probable outcome based on the question that you put in. The scale of it is enormous. Over the last, I've been in tech for more than 30 years, and it used to be that it was pretty exciting to have a database with 100 rows of information in, and then we got to massive big data, and then the next stage, machine learning, and then the next stage is this. So effectively, it's still the same thing. We're still saying, here's a bunch of data, tell us what the answer is. It's just the scale of it and the process, the reasoning of it has become much better. Okay. So, another question we often get asked, though not quite in this way, is AI a slam dunk? So is it for sure that AI is going to be super successful? Is it really going to revolutionize the world? Or is it just another one of the fads that there is out there? And where does it find its balance? So there are some risks around AI. And I'm not talking about the governance risks and the risks of things, but there is a genuine risk of AI being really successful can cause a huge problem, which is that, like I said, you can have all of these locked away people learning Shakespearean language, and that's great. But what if you then took another generation and you just took the output of all of those people who had learned all of that stuff, and that was your input for the next generation? And then you kept doing that sequentially and sequentially and sequentially. So effectively, the input you've got is reducing in quality and variety as you go through over time. It's not visible to the human eye, but if we took all the works of literature at the moment and we did a variance from A to B, it's a massive, massive amount of information. If you then just kept generating new stuff from the stuff that's there, it's not truly new. It's generated on the basis of the stuff that's there. So eventually, the corpus of information that you've got gets reduced and reduced and reduced, and the quality can be diminished. So there was an article in Nature in July this year, which was a survey, which was a study, which showed that the AI models can collapse when trained on recursively generated data. So effectively, an AI model, the bit that sits, the brain, if you like, of the AI, sits inside the model and it's learning all the time from the information, but eventually it gets to the point where it's unable to function because there's been so much garbage in, there's been so much stuff in that's not of a high quality, that that it generates it starts to do what we call hallucination. Some of you will know that, some of you won't. And this is basically where an AI starts to create completely random information that doesn't seem to be based on any of the inputs that you've given it, or its accuracy in answer becomes much, much, much less precise. Or, for example, if you're doing image generation, you can say to it, generate me a butterfly floating floating over a river, and you'd probably find you'd get something like a plane landing on some tarmac, because it's got the idea of flight in there somewhere, but it's not. And so that's one of the real challenges that there is as society moves more and more to reliance on this, and especially in the creative arts, you know, as your creative input that's driving some of these things becomes, how do you avoid that? If anybody's interested, like I say, this is a paper that has been published. I would say it's not easy reading, but if anybody feels like reading it, it's interesting. And also, you know, there are counter arguments. There are also arguments that the speed of development in AI, which, as everybody knows, is phenomenal, is such that it's automatically learning to compensate for these as well. But I think when you talk about AI from a generational point of view, this is one of the biggest risks. Obviously, when you talk about it, I'll talk about a little bit later some of the risks that you have as well. Big question we also get asked in more general conversations, and it's not always like this, but there's always a counterpoint. If we're doing a strategy session, will AI replace me? People are often saying, so, you know, if we do this new process, what will happen to my job? You know, if we do this, how can I, as a creative, for example, I'm very nervous that I'm not going to be able to continue to do my work. People won't pay for this because they can do it much cheaper over here and so on. And you know, this is obviously, in a way, this is the kind of the legitimate test of our time. So many of you will be familiar with the concepts of divergent and convergent thinking. So, you know, just at a very high level, divergent thinking is effectively looking at a problem, trying to think of all the different solutions, not being bound by a single thing, and really kind of going out there to find the solutions that you want. AIs are not at the moment as good at thinking outside the box as they are at synthesizing all the options that are available. So in other words, if you are asking an AI, and I'll show you an example of this in a minute, if you're asking an AI to do something where you're asking it to create lots of options, let's say, for example, I'm a novelist and I want to get started, and I ask it to give me, I want to write a book about a lot of people sitting in a glove factory on a wet Friday morning. Give me the opening paragraph of my novel, or give me 5 or 6 options for the opening paragraph of my novel. It will give me 5 or 6 options for the opening paragraph of my novel, but they'll all be kind of similar. And you can ask it to diverge further and further and further. And as you ask it to diverge further and further and further, you'll find that the quality of that divergence is actually decreasing as you go through. And this is one of the great things that one of the great challenges is trying to make AI truly creative, because it's not truly creative. That being said, there is a very interesting, well, I'll show you in a minute. Convergent thinking is where you've got all the options. You're trying to bring everything into a centralized decision. It's much more rules-based. Convergent thinkers tend to be people who like to focus on one path and follow that path through. AIs are very good at that, because they are at heart, they are still trying to follow a logical set of patterns and so on. When they start to hallucinate, it's because they're trying to be creative. One of the things you can do as a technologist working with an AI is you have a whole bunch of different settings you can put, one of which is temperature. There are a bunch of others, but the temperature allows you to control how random it is effectively and how creative it is. But they are really good at bringing all those random ideas down. They're really good at looking at lots of different things and being able to bring them together. And so where you've got complicated business processes that you want to simplify, or you've got multiple different data sources and you want to kind of harmonize them all into one, that's a really good sweet spot for them. But just to reiterate what I said, so here's an example of why They are random. So this is an AI which is called Claude, which is one of the biggest ones. So I'm talking here, asking a simple question. What's the difference between convergent and divergent thinking? Great, gives me a really good answer. Lots of data there, fantastic, exactly what I want to know. Now let's get another question. And that I think is a really good example because it isn't magic, it just has the information you've given it. And it has the information it was trained on at a point in time. So at that point, of course, it's child's play to link it up to a calendar and to make it know the date. But my point is that you as a person have to put that in place. You as a person are really in control of what it does and how far it does. And so if you're putting it into a process, be that a business process or a creative process, it is a tool that will fulfill a certain function. When we look at building out pipelines for clients, and I talk about pipelines because you don't go into a client and you say, here's an AI, it's going to solve your problem. What you go into a client and say is, okay, here you've got 10 problems. We have an AI solution for these 9 or 10 of them. Each AI solution is probably going to consist of 2 or 3 different tools or models doing that part of the process. And that's an important thing. And it's also an important thing. It's a bit like, it's a bit like saying, if you use Microsoft Excel, it's a different process to using Microsoft Word. There's a lot of these around. They're called tools, gems, co-pilots, agents. Effectively, they are specifically trained models that do unique pieces of work. And that's where AI is really good. So these are the ones that have just been released in the last couple of weeks by Google, Gemini. These are called gems. So they've got a learning coach which helps you break down complex topics, making them easier to understand. So what's this doing? It's looking at the data that's been given to you and it's using its reasoning to be able to break it down into ways that you understand. Okay, so it's quite straightforward. Brainstormer, this is a really good idea. This gives you ideas for things. So kind of like the divergent thinking that I was talking about. But what it's actually doing is looking in its existing set of data and saying, oh, okay, lots of people have done this for a birthday. Lots of people have done this. This is something like that, something like that. So, it's the same thing. Career guide, writing editor, coding partner. So writing editor is a really interesting one because I'm sure lots of people have used Grammarly and things like that in their systems. Everybody who uses Microsoft Word has probably got the red squiggly thing underneath it. Essentially, same thing. It's looking at what you've done. It's looking at what loads of millions of other people have done in the same situation. It's saying, okay, this seems to be the right version of it. Yours is not the right version of it. But it's not looking at a single word. It's looking at the context, at the phrasing, and all of those sorts of things. But it is essentially doing the same thing. And this is where, in business certainly, but I think in the creative arts as well, these small tools, co-pilots, gems, they get called, like I said, lots of different things, are where you can immediately see benefit, but within a very refined and defined and controllable way as well. Another question we get asked a lot is, what sort of things do you do with AI? So we do quite a lot of different things with AI, and some of them are really big AI, and some of them are very different AI, and some of them never used to be called AI and are now called AI. So I'm going to give you a few little project examples. So we did a project for a council in London around dynamic pricing. So they had they wanted to be able to have a tool that would adjust the pricing based on things like weather and on the car that you were driving and its emissions and so on. So therefore, if there was not so much traffic in the area, would you then be able to get cheaper parking? And if your car was a low polluting car, your parking cost would go. If you were a resident, your parking cost would go down, and so on, things like that. So that was a very simple example of a process that was built. So it was a model. They then put it into their systems. We just built the model for that, which allowed you to do dynamic pricing off the back of it. This is one we've done 2 or 3 times. I do apologize for the design of this. We pride ourselves on our design work. This was an internal project that we gave to one of the developers who did a great job from a development perspective, but oh my God, it's hideous. We have, as I mentioned, a warehouse in Philadelphia, and this warehouse does shipments of diabetes products to all around America. And one of the things related to that is we get a lot of different invoices and certificates and so on from different companies, and they're never in the same format. And and there was somebody who's, well, it wasn't his job, but he was having to do a lot of copying and pasting and looking in these invoices, finding the information, finding where it was, because sometimes it would be called one thing, sometimes it would be called another, sometimes it'd be at the top, you know. And so we built a little tool, AI tool, that does exactly that. It goes through, recognizes, builds the spreadsheet, boom. He's able to be much more productive and a lot more satisfied in what he's doing on his ongoing basis. We've also done this for a couple of other large companies in different ways, same basic function. And this is one of the most useful things I think, of this sort of thing, is being able to take out and remove the need to have a manual process that is of very little benefit to anybody. The person who's behind it can then be redeployed in a really good and much more useful way. The results are just as accurate, if not more accurate. And then you also have the benefit of it just speeds up that whole business process. So now, instead of it taking 10, 15 minutes for somebody to do, it takes 20 seconds to be able to go through and do as well. Beauty product identification. Now, I can't talk about the specifics of this because of an NDA, but what I can say is there is a beauty product that can be used in a good way, or it can be used in a bad way. Not a bad way, but misused, misapplied. So the process here was to be able to go through lots and lots of social media photographs and be able to identify customers and clients who were posting images of themselves using it and identify whether this was being used in a good way or in a bad way. Again, visual image recognition, essentially saying we started off from the point of view of we have 10,000 images of this product being used in a good way, we have 4,000 images of it being used in a bad way, and effectively the system is comparing those two and then taking actions off the basis of that to drive further marketing revenue. Verification applications, financial due diligence, and manufacturing quality. So this is something that we have a lot of meetings, conversations, and so on about, which is essentially where you have something that is compliance based. So whether it's an ISO or whether in America we do a lot of work for on the HIPAA standard, and effectively this is where you have a set of criteria that are in multiple different documents, and you need to match them against a single standard that is in one document or two documents. So this is not replacing the auditing process. It's not replacing the human responsibility to assign an approval or not. But what it's doing is taking out the grunge work in the middle of having to go through all those documents and find the proof and so on. And it allows you to take a standard, to give it a whole range of documents, and it can be multiple documents. We just did a product recently which was sat on top of 64 terabytes of documentation, and it goes through, it analyzes, it brings all of this stuff back, and it answers the specific questions that are required by the standard, then produces an output which can then be used by the auditor to form the basis of the approval. Also, you can take it further, and I'll demonstrate a little bit later on one of our tools. You can then ask questions further to dig deeper into this, and if they have questions, they can either ask the people concerned or they can ask the documents in that particular statement. Custom pathways for learning. So we do a lot of learning especially for large automotives. We do a lot of learning systems and so on. So this is one where instead of creating automatic questions, this is a process by which we allow the system to generate questions off the basis of all of the learning materials that were provided, and then based on how you answered a set of questions, it would then give you another set of questions that came up off the basis of that, again generated from the content that was built into the system as well. And so all of these, I should say, have the same theme, which is generating content from content that's there. And that's the kind of that way. That's not to say that it can't seem to generate new content. Of course it can. But that's always the challenge. Artifacts removal, again, an interesting one that we've been talked about, which is where you have film cameras going out, doing a lot of filming of different things. There's currently a fairly manual process to be able to remove artifacts that you don't want, like, you know, either strings or flying objects that are in there or so on. So we've been working on developing a tool which removes those artifacts automatically. And it's the same process. It's effectively teaching the AI that this sort of artifact is not wanted in here. It then has the ability to be able to go through, recognize and remove those artifacts en masse from a large batch of say, high quality video or virtual reality stuff. This is also, this is one of our internal products, and I think this is interesting to talk about. This is called My Content Scout. This is a product that we've developed on the top of various AI services, and you'll see a few of them here. We currently have it live with about 2,500 users, scaling up to around about 10,000 early next year. And this has been a really interesting experience for us in terms of the development process and really getting to grips with what's out there, what the restrictions and so on. And as I say, this sits on top of a company's data, so it's an internally facing tool. So if you have the clients that we work with, and one of them, for example, is Stellantis, which is it's now the group of Peugeot and Citroën and Maserati and all of those, and they have massive amounts of data that they are in documents. So I'm not talking about database, I'm talking about price lists, I'm talking about sales catalogs, I'm talking about photographs, I'm talking about meeting videos, I'm talking about promotional videos, I'm talking about podcasts, and they want to be able to search across all of that in one place in multiple different languages, because they're in lots of different languages. We've also deployed this to a large building organization, which is where we have the 64 terabytes. But the point here is not really about the product. It's more about the search process that you go. So by using AI, we're able to use simple language, English language or French language, German, Portuguese, whatever. It will search through. This is for our own internal HR. We use it as an HR portal. So it's again using those things. It's looking at the data we've got. It's finding the data in the right document. It's giving us a summarized answer, so I don't have to kind of go through and search for everything. It's searching not just through the text, but through the images and the order and so on as well in there. And it's doing it in a very easy to use, simple manner. And it searches text, audio, video. It also searches dashboards. So if you've got historical dashboards of reports that you want to search through. And then it will find the right place in the document policy that will be there. It also does a few other things. So that's using natural language processing. So it's using the ability to be able to have the AI understand the text that sits under there. Does the same with images. A couple of things here. It's searching images to find images if I'm looking. So I might have a large bank of corporate images I want to do, or I just want to find a photo of somebody or something like that. It will come back and give me that. But also, the AI is smart enough to really understand this, and you can see generating a description of the content that's in there. So, you know, if I want to describe a beach or a product or something that I've got in there, it will give me all of that information in there as well. Does it cross language? So here I am, and it doesn't do translation. It's just it understands, because the AI understands multiple languages. So I'm asking who's going to play the Silver Surfer. I've taken this and I've put it internally into the company for some reason. And then it's gone off. I've asked the question in English, and it's found me the answer. Because I'm English, it's giving me the answer in English, which is great. But what we find is the source that it's being used for that is German. So, and this is one of the great things about AI. You don't have to translate everything. It will understand across multiple. So I could have asked that question in Spanish and got the answer in Spanish or Portuguese and so on. Also, I mentioned earlier on being able to drill down into documents. So here, for example, again, this is, let's say and again, this is cars, but it might be, I'm in a university and I'm studying and things like that. So I've asked my question, it's come back with 4 or 5 different options, given me a summary, but now I want to kind of drill down into this one, the Peugeot handbook here. So the Peugeot handbook, it's 428 pages, but I just want to know how I can play travel announcements. And again, it's drilling down, it's giving me the information from my document. So it's behind my firewall, it's private inside my element, but it's using the most effective part of AI, which is it's sitting on top of information that's there. Again, Park Assist, I can go through. It's going to give me the answer to what I want it to do in there as well. But then if I ask a question it doesn't have the answer to, and again, this is across video and so on, it'll tell me it doesn't know the answer. And that's an important point because you need to train the AI not to just make things up. But I can go to a different version, one from 2 or 3 years ago, and it will give me, or 2 or 3 years more recently, it will give me the answer to that question in there as well. So, and then the final thing is one that you will all have seen or used in some different way, but just to show you how casual AI has become. Here I'm doing the same. Who is the Chief Data Officer at Bentley? Speech to text, so it's doing exactly the same thing. I'm just speaking and it's going off, it's doing the same thing. It's bringing me back the information. In this particular case, it's found the information for me. It hasn't found it in a document, but it has found it in a podcast, and it's been able to get me that information out from there as well. So all of that is mapping and using.
This is Driven by Data, the podcast.
All of that, I think that's the last one I put in there. And there's a ton more stuff in there, but this isn't really about the product. The point about this is more about how AI is being used and how, we've found very good responses from our clients in terms of utilization of this because it's solving a real big problem, which is how much time do I spend trying to find stuff, especially in a big organization, even a small organization. And find stuff, like I say, includes video. It includes everything else, includes XR and so on. So, there are various surveys that say that, an average knowledge worker spends something like 30% of their time, one way or another, trying to find stuff, like searching a video or searching stuff. That's a massive saving that AI can bring, but it doesn't diminish what that person can do. It just means that they can do a much better job and probably are going to be a little bit more fulfilled than that. So, sorry, let me. Okay, so I'm slightly conscious of the time here, so I will try and zoom through the last bits. Isn't AI just the latest tech bubble? I bought a jetpack last year. So I think AI isn't the dot-com boom. It isn't the metaverse. And that's not to say both of those aren't valid. Both of those are hugely valid and have been hugely influential and continue to be hugely influential. It's not even the internet. It's the Industrial Revolution. It is, in my view, that deep a change and a challenge. And let me give you a few examples of why. So, it impacts every worker in every profession, just like the Industrial Revolution did. ChatGPT, when it came out, had 1 million users in the first 5 days of being available. Like, that is an astonishing uptake into, and it is everywhere. And like I say, if you go back and you look at what AI is being used from Google Translate and Alexa and all of those things, that is an enormous amount of influence that was there even before ChatGPT. 64% of businesses expect AI to increase their productivity. Like, that is phenomenal. I can't think of anything else where people have been so quick to jump in on things. China leads in AI adoption. 58% of companies in China have deployed AI and 30% are considering integration. In comparison, the United States has a lower adoption with 25% of companies using AI and 43% of companies. So, clearly, and I don't need to tell you this, but it is there everywhere in everybody else. It creates fear. Industrial Revolution, Luddites, anybody who's read history will know, the Industrial Revolution caused massive fear, just like AI is causing massive fear. In Switzerland, 57%, Germany, 59%, Netherlands, 64%, concerns about loss of jobs are comparatively low. This percentage is particularly high in Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Belgium. So it's interesting to see where those concerns are and, draw whatever conclusions you want to from that particular information. And you can see here, these statistics are around people who are nervous about the confidence in people to develop. So people are most confident, only then half confident in university researchers, and least confident really in Facebook. But I think the point about it is that it is undeniably there, and the need for people to wrap their arms around it and organizations to understand the consequences of it is enormous and very, very urgent. It creates new jobs that were never there. And this is a really important part of it. Like the Industrial Revolution created millions of new types of jobs that were never there in the first place. So the World Economic Forum, a white paper was published last year, and the World Economic Forum estimated that 97 million new jobs would be created as a result of AI. That's 97 million jobs that didn't exist. That's not just the ones that would be enhanced or improved, but completely new. From AI model and prompt engineers, interface and interaction designers, because there's a whole different way of thinking about how you integrate with AI versus any other legacy tools. AI content creators, you know, I think there is a tendency for creatives to be very nervous of what this can do, but I think it's in a way the creative industries are slightly lagging behind everyone else in that the tools are not quite there yet for people to really understand what new art forms and new design forms there are from AI, but they will undoubtedly be there. Data curators and trainers, like I say, none of this works with crap data in the process. Ethics and governance specialists, you know, we have our first internal governance specialist who we've now appointed as a role, and that's not just because we're positioning it, but because genuinely people want to talk to people. They want to talk to people who are really well informed about that particular space and what it means because of the risks associated with it. Gives you an idea of the jobs people regard as being exposed and non-exposed. Software developers, and I speak as somebody in charge of a software development company, software developers feel very exposed. Human resources managers feel less exposed in this particular example. What's interesting, though, I think, is that a lot of software development can be quite boring. It can be doing repetitive things again and again. This actually is a way of facilitating the best of those people to be able to do the best of their work and not get bogged down. So, you know, I think it's a question of perspective, but undeniably, it is nerve-wracking. I think in our particular profession, being an AI software developer requires slightly different skills than being somebody who is writing for a traditional system. But there are new jobs there and new opportunities in there as well. It improves life for some. So AI can help breast cancer diagnosis. Northeastern researchers develop a new system that's nearly 100% accurate. I think the medical profession is one of the ones where there is going to be enormous improvements. Suffering from depression, the Hong Kong team have developed an AI that can help tell if you're at risk of AI by looking into your eyes. I don't know how valid that is, but I thought it was quite catchy. And this one, UK's first teacherless AI classroom set to open in London. This is a really interesting one. Bunch of kids. It's all done through headsets and virtual reality and AI. Sounds fantastic. Hey, what could go wrong? But it's interesting because actually, if you are in a place where you have 30 kids, the teacher can't design and mold the course to you. The AI can design and mold the course to you and learn from that. So, you know, I'm definitely in the camp of I don't think it's all bad, but not all. So it's not good for all. For example, UK's first teacherless classroom set to open in London. We have examples. Air Canada had to pay damages for chatbot lies. So for Air Canada, a chatbot was basically spewing out a whole bunch of false information about the flights, and they had to pay damages for that. That, though, poor training, poor information, poor governance. All algorithms identify everything but COVID-19. Sorry, AI algorithms. So this was a survey, an analysis where they were analyzing people within a hospital for their testing the AI. It identified everything, didn't identify COVID-19. Healthcare algorithm failed to flag black patients. So again, there is bias in a lot of the training material that's used, and not necessarily intentional bias, but there is a lot of unintentional bias because there's been intentional, non-intentional bias. And it's not just in terms of black patients or black people, it's across the board. And that's a real challenge from a governance perspective. Dataset trained Microsoft chatbot to spew racist tweets. So this was a few years ago. Microsoft decided they wanted to kind of, so they built a chatbot on Twitter, they put it out, but it learnt from its environment. And as we all know, Twitter is a pretty foul environment to be in. So as people were abusing the chatbot, it was learning to abuse back and come out with racist things. So after only a few hours, they shut it down. But I think that's a really good example of AI doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is learn from its inputs. The responsibility of people to manage that process and so on is obviously the key thing here. And then it has huge impact on the environment. The Industrial Revolution, massive impact on the environment. And AI is also having a massive input on the environment. The current level of AI usage for just running the machines will exceed the electricity consumption of a small country like Belgium by 2026. In Thailand, there are various farmers who are no longer able to use water for their rice fields because all of the water has been absorbed by the local data centers to cool things down. 2022, Google operated its data center in Finland on 97% carbon-free energy. That number is around 4 to 18% for its data centers in Asia. So there are lots of side effects of this which have an environmental impact, and it's not as a surprise is equivalent. It's not the dot-com boom, it isn't the metaverse, it is the Industrial Revolution. And like the Industrial Revolution, it's ultimately people that are at the heart of it. But it is a massive adaptation. Protecting data is really important because, as you all know, there's lots of privacy and disinformation. I pulled this out because I think this is quite interesting, relatively recent. This new proposal from various big players in the field who are looking for personhood credentials so that you will effectively be able to have an alias behind you when you log on. So it will still know that the person who is alias 123 does this, this, and this, but it won't necessarily be able to pin it directly to you. This is a proposal from Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, and a bunch of other people. Whether or not it really happens, I think, is another issue. And I think there is also a lot of things around this. So, for example, putting AI into organizations is great, but if the organization has not got its permissions in its systems right, you could inadvertently provide information to people that it shouldn't do. And that has nothing to do with the AI. That has to do with fundamental problems that are in your organization anyway, but this will expose them in a way that's probably most people would prefer not to. So finally, before we open up for questions, AI, all in. So as a society, we are all in on AI. There is, I don't think, any choice. I think, I'm sure some people may disagree with me, but it's here, it's real, it's embedded in everything. Living with it is the only choice we have, but we're the shapers and makers who create this world. And just like we made factories and industries work for us in the Industrial Revolution, I really do think we will do the same with AI and how it works. But I think it's going to be a massive period of learning. And with our clients and the work that we do, it's very interesting to see the breadth of things that people ask about and the sheer number of things that people are thinking about with AI, even if they're not all possible, or they're not all realistic, or they're not all cost effective, or they're not all permitted by the IT department at this particular point in time. The fact that only 2 years really after this whole process began, so many people are having such broad ideas and such broad conversations shows, I think, the transformational power, not just of the technology, but of the ethos and the thought process behind it. So thank you all very much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. This is who I am and where I am, and also in Studio One, so not very far away. Thank you very much, and I'd like to open up for any questions anybody has.